All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. Yeah, I saw that little slide there showing the number of deaths, the approximate number in Gaza. Jumped the gun a little bit there, but we will center, as we do on Halitics, the plight of the Palestinian people at the hands of Israel and at the hands of the Harris-Biden administration. It is horrific. The UN chief said on Wednesday, didn't catch this, but I'll tell you now, and we'll show the slide too, that he's never seen this scale of destruction in his work, in his lifetime as an activist. I mean, advocate, I guess, for human rights, right? You're the head of the UN. That's your job, is to advocate for human rights. You might not always succeed, but you're advocating peace, a better world. That's the ostensible. That is the reason for the UN in the first place. The UN chief says he's never seen anything like this. 40 more killed now. This was a headline from Al Jazeera 6 hours ago. I couldn't find the story. I don't know whether they're recalibrating the death number. Maybe that was a preliminary number. I know that a second headline said 16 more killed today. That would be 40 people yesterday. Another 16 apparently today, but I'm giving you the best approximate I could give you. I always try to be as accurate as I can, but because of the quote fog of, and I don't want to say war, but the fog of oppression, persecution, the Israeli army's occupation of Gaza, it's very difficult for the people there, obviously, to get an accurate count. And as we've said over and over again, and as many others who are on the ground or who have been on the ground have said, the count from the health ministry there in Gaza is necessarily incomplete. It's necessarily an undercount because there are bodies in the rubble. There are missing people whom we don't know if they're dead or not, who we don't know if they're dead or not. And there are also people who may have been killed as a direct result of the Israeli occupation, the invasion and the occupation, but they're not considered to be directly casualties of the Israeli massacres. So we give you the best number we can, and I, again, am just going to secondary sources. The number we have right now is a little over 4,100, and that includes, as best I can tell, 40 yesterday, but that may or may not be correct, obviously. So we'll have more on Monday, obviously, with the weekend ensuing. The numbers, at least for the past few days, will probably be more accurately provided. But this is the best I can tell you. It is an absolute human rights disaster. It's a nightmare, and it keeps getting worse. Here's what the UN chief says. I mentioned this is from Middle East Eye. And he is absolutely quoted as saying this, there's no question. This is the worst that Antonio Guterres has ever seen, ever witnessed. It's never been this bad anywhere in the world, as far as he can call. That's from Barlamon Today. That would be a Moroccan news service. But there are many other places where this headline will be found, but not the not U.S. news, not U.S. media. No parallel in his tenure as Secretary General of the United Nations, and even beyond. I mean, he's ever witnessed. So this gentleman, you can tell from the picture, probably in his 70s, I'm going to guess, and he's never witnessed anything this bad. That's our closest ally, right? We have a special relationship with Israel. And neither duopoly nominee is going to change that special relationship in any way. From Middle East, I think I had Barlamon Today that said that the UN chief there, Guterres, has never seen anything the like. Nothing has been as horrific in his tenure or before as what Israel's doing now. He said, Torres said, U.S. must pressure Israel to end the war. So despite the claims, right, we've heard this from Kamala at the debate, at the DNC, in response to questioning. I think this was I guess AOC couldn't quite try to gaslight people to the extent where she would say, oh, they're working round the clock, even though that's what Harris said. I think we all know that's a complete load of crap. And the UN chief knows it. He says U.S. must pressure Israel to end the war. So what he's saying is it's not. The U.S. isn't. The U.S. isn't doing anything. In fact, the U.S. is prolonging the war. The U.S. is helping the Harris-Biden. I really want to be clear. The Harris-Biden. Donald Trump is not president. Donald Trump has no influence over the State Department right now. Donald Trump has no influence over the shipment of arms to Israel. That is in the control of the Harris-Biden administration. It's not even in the control of Congress. Congress has authorized the shipment of bombs and missiles and bombers and all the weapons that Israel is using to kill innocent women, children, babies, men. They're all being provided by us. And by us, I mean by the Harris-Biden team. So when Kamala says, oh, we're working night and day, the president and I are working round the clock, she's lying to you. She's flat out, that's just a lie. It's a whopper. It's like Trump said, oh, they're eating dogs, which supposedly maybe one immigrant maybe did eat a dog. I don't know. But he was fact-checked on that. I don't believe it for a second, but someone somewhere said that, I think. So, and starving people will eat whatever they can eat. So you have someone who's starving, maybe they did eat an animal pet. I don't know. That's hardly a reason for demonizing all Haitian immigrants. But, Kamala tells her whoppers too. Oh, we're working around the clock. Or, oh yeah, there was all these, Hamas raped all these women horrifically on October 7, when that claim has been clearly debunked. Now, we're not saying there weren't any sexual assaults, violations, rapes on October 7 by Hamas. There might have been, but they haven't been proven. What there was on October 7 is a lot of murder, a lot of killing by Hamas. And that's what Kamala could talk about and should talk about. She wants to talk about, what triggered the specific invasion by Israel, the occupation, the current oppressive, incredibly oppressive occupation. But obviously this has been going on for 75 years, more than that, 77 years now, right? Israel was founded in 1947, 48, and the Palestinians have been second class at best residents ever since, and at worse, and much worse. So this is what's happening. I won't vote for that. I don't know how anyone can. I won't vote for somebody who lies in defending, in defending a policy that is completely evil, that is sinister, that is diabolically wrong. And she's doing it for political reasons, right? My sense is Kamala couldn't give a rat's fat butt about the Palestinians one way or the other. Probably if you forced her, she'd say, yeah, it would be better. I wish Israel wasn't killing all those people. But, it's more important that I win the election, and if it means that we have to sacrifice tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Palestinian lives, well, so be it. I don't want to risk possibly losing the election by pushing for humanitarian end to this war. I'll claim I'm doing it, but it's not true. And of course, it doesn't even help her, because the Republicans are claiming over and over again she's not doing enough. She's not doing enough to help Israel. She's betraying Israel. So hell, if you're going to get criticized for doing the right thing, even though you're doing demonstrably the wrong thing, Well, why don't you just do the right thing then? Here's the Washington Post getting it completely wrong. Let me try to get a full headline. Yeah, so you could see that, but I'll try to get it a little bit better here. The Post claiming their latest. Just wanted to highlight this because it's such a. But also, before I put that up, don't forget, click like, click subscribe. Do me a solid. Let's get those numbers. I want to get over 5. I think if I get to 500 subscribers, am I even halfway there? I was at 249. I'm not even quite halfway. That was yesterday. Maybe it's gone up to 250. I don't know. Every now and then I lose a person too. Mostly I don't lose people, but every now and then I do. So want to get up to, hey, listen, 500. I was looking for 1,000. But if we get to 500, then YouTube, I believe, Google will send me a few bucks, a few shekels every now and again. So that would be nice. I've heard from some people, maybe this is true, that and I've got a caller. It's funny because I should have heard you call. Did you, caller? I've got you. Did you just call, or have you been hearing the phone ring on your end for a while now?
No, it rang 3 times, I think. I just dialed a minute ago.
All right. Well, thanks so much. And I'm just trying to mute a little bit because I don't want to get that echo for viewers, for listeners. Are you the gentleman who called me earlier this week?
Yeah, that's me.
Well, it's great to hear from you. What's on your mind, caller? You can say your name if you want. I'll call you by your name, but I don't want to out anybody if they don't want to be identified.
You called me Triple G, which is quicker than saying my username, so that's fine with me.
All right, or we'll go with G Cubed. What's going on, G Cubed?
Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about what I think is like the broader context surrounding all of the different points that you just made together. I don't know if it sounds like a weird conspiracy theory to phrase it this way, but I think at a time where it was becoming rapidly becoming easier for people and corporations alike to pump out disinformation, because I think the effect that the internet was going to have in this period of our lives was really underestimated at first. I think our relationship with Israel has kind of swapped places. We're the puppet now. And that's kind of the main culprit behind all of the things that you just listed over the last 10 minutes or so. It's the relationship between, sending money over there, having it come back to us in the form of buying politicians, having them make more policy to keep money flowing in that continuous circle. And I was wondering if you have any idea how you break a cycle like that. It's not going to come from the Republicans or the Democrats. So how do you get a candidate to be taken seriously enough who's going to not fall in line?
So let me jump in, and I don't go anywhere. This is a great question, I think, G Cubed, Triple G. Do you, and I'm going to sort of follow up your question with a question first. Do you excuse politicians for this? Do you say, because I've heard this, AIPAC is so powerful, we can't rein them in. There's nothing we can do. So, we just have to hope for the best. And maybe if Kamala is elected, she'll be better than we fear. She might be based on her rhetoric. Or do you say, no, even or notwithstanding the power of these special interest groups, we still have the right to demand better from our electeds and from our candidates?
Well, here's the way I look at it. People who, especially people far on the left, who are caving in and voting for Kamala Harris, it always boils down to the lesser of two evils, right? Well, we only effectively have 2 choices, so you got to pick the less evil one. But the less evil option is still an evil option. It still moves you in the direction of bad. So, no, I don't want to make any excuses for anyone taking dirty money. I think it all has to go, and we literally will make no progress until that happens.
So in answer to your question, and then I'll let you have a follow-up, Triple G, and I thank you again. Great to hear from you. Really appreciate your call. I know you called before. I appreciate your staying with me. I think the answer first of all, I often get hopeless. I think there's no answers or no solutions. I think the answer is, though, clear. In this case, there is a better option who will be on the ballot in most states, not every state, but her name is Jill Stein. I mean, I think that's the solution. For those who fear or who make the claim, well, Trump is much worse, maybe Kamala's bad, but we can't let the bad be the enemy of the awful, right? Because Trump, in this reading, would be so much worse. I don't buy it. I don't think she's that much less bad. I think she's pretty much just as bad as Trump, and on some issues. In fact, the Washington Post, let me show this real quick, Triple G, the opinion piece, they make the point that they claim, the Washington Post editorial page, that Harris wants peace in the Middle East and Trump wants peace in Ukraine. I think that's only half right. I think it's clear that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have done everything possible to stymie peace between Israel and Palestine, to stymie some kind of solution. So I don't accept that headline. And I do think that Trump has a legitimate argument that he is, would be better at ending the hostilities in Ukraine. So I think, at least on that issue, he's probably less bad than she is. When I talk about foreign wars, foreign, interventions.
That one's tough for me because my instinct is to say we need to get out of every war. I don't like violence as a solution to anything. As a practical matter, I'm going to say something that maybe sounds a little bad, but bear with me. If we're going to do this thing with Russia and eventually have war with them, I don't want that. I do not want that. But if we're going to do it, I wish we would kind of do it with our military instead of continuing to grind up the populations of other countries in the wake of our feud with Russia. We've been doing it for over 50 years. This isn't like what's happening in Ukraine is bigger than some of the things that have come before, but this is not new. We've been putting other nations in the grinder for decades, and it's maybe an opinion born out of frustration, but I feel like if we're going to do it, can we just do it? And can we stop trying to use other people that don't have anything to do with it as the weapon that we're going to use to do it?
Well, I think those are really good points. I don't want us involved there at all. But in a way, what we're doing is worse, is the most immoral of all. We're fighting to the last Ukrainian, right? We're fighting Russia to the last Ukrainian. We're giving Ukraine the weapons to kill Russians, but also to have their country laid to complete waste. And now, this is interesting. I just posted this online here on the screen. England is now saying, or UK is saying, hey, we want Ukraine to be able to start sending long-range missiles into the heart of Russia, maybe even hit Moscow, which is something that Biden has fought against and said no, but he probably will approve it if it's UK weapons, just not American weapons. This is really bad in a lot of ways. It definitely could lead to an escalation in the Middle East with Russia helping Iran in its war now, in its Cold War with the soft war with Israel and the United States because of Gaza. So this is an escalation if he does. But even here, Triple G, what you're talking about is not the U.S. getting its hands fully dirty, but rather letting the UK weapons be used to target Russia.
Well, I mean, I think it's allowing the UK to pick a fight. I mean, it still represents an escalation, and that's still a bad thing. But allowing the UK to saber rattle is a little different, I think, than arming, drip feeding arms to a country that's actually already engaged in a fight and encouraging them to do, things that would be considered an escalation. So it's all bad, but I suppose I hadn't really given much consideration to what the UK thinks about it.
Well, last point, I just sort of brought that up because you were saying we're promoting wars that we ourselves aren't directly fighting, right? That we're not suffering casualties. And even here, we're saying to the UK, and that's, I guess, up to them, but to the extent they're asking for our opinion, we're saying, yeah, go ahead and send those long-range missiles against Moscow. And my response to all of this is, this is the worst of all worlds. As much as I wanted us, and we should have, and we should now be promoting peace, we should be negotiating with Putin, which we're not doing. But what we're doing is just prolonging and prolonging and prolonging. If we're that certain that Russia is the evil empire and that we need to defeat it once and for all, well, then why the hell don't we send our troops in and take control? We probably could defeat Russia. There'd probably be a thermonuclear war, but in the end, we would win that war. We have a much more powerful military, and we've got our troops right there in Poland and close, right close to Russia. So, at least then it would be over. But what we're doing is just prolonging and prolonging it, more deaths, more casualties over a long period of time. And guess who's profiting from this? The weapons industry.
Yeah, and that's, again, I want to shift back just a little bit. I'm sorry, somebody just...
Oh, no, you're good. Hey, thanks for calling. Yeah, finish off, and then I'll let you go. But you wanted to comment on the sort of long, prolonged agony that we're putting Ukraine through.
Well, I wanted to kind of shift back towards Israel, where we were at the beginning of the conversation, because all of our war policy and a not insignificant amount of our domestic policy is being heavily influenced by a foreign power, which would be Israel. Now, AIPAC, it's worth mentioning, doesn't necessarily represent the interests of the people of Israel. It's just a powerful conglomerate of money that happens to come from Israel. So they have the plausible story that, that's where they're from and that's what they represent. But it's a business like anything else. And they have a vested interest in making sure America's at war forever. They also have an interest in making sure that America has, sort of a revolving door of weak presidents, which is why I never took this idea that Donald Trump would install himself as a dictator on day one very seriously. It's not because, even if he does have aspirations of doing that, he's going to run up against people that have to be elected, not appointed. It's not going to work that way. And if push comes to shove, somebody, one of the large money handlers somewhere over his head, would literally put him down before they would see America become a dictatorship, because dictatorships are bad for business. And it's really that simple. Like, Trump is an empty threat, but he scares a lot of people, so he's useful. Kamala's an empty suit, but she makes some people happy. And I'm planning to vote for Jill Stein, but it's hard to get that message through to a lot of common people.
I know. You're right. I mean, 100%. It's virtually impossible. And I don't quite understand why it is so challenging, but it really is. You said something before, and I was going to, boot you off the show, but I just wanted to comment on one more thing and get your feedback. You said that you don't think that Trump would be able to install a dictatorship because they're bad for business and ultimately corporate chieftains are controlling our government. And I largely agree with that. But I'm going to give you a scenario where I think those corporate chieftains would welcome or at least accept a Trump autocracy. And that is where they're concerned that the alternative is a Jill Stein presidency. They're concerned that the alternative is Bernie Sanders becomes president and he's in a position to really move our country far to the left. Now, I don't think he would do that now, but I think there was a real fear in 2016 that could happen. And I think there was, certainly a willingness among the elites, the corporate, financial, industrial elites to say, hey, anything's better than Bernie, so we'll defeat him, and then, Trump might beat Hillary, fine, who cares? Or Hillary might beat Trump, that's just as good. But I think when push comes to shove, we saw in 1933 in Germany that the aristocrats and the corporate elites had a choice between the communists and the fascist Nazi genocidal maniacs, and they chose the latter. That's
true. I'd say that's kind of what I was getting at with my revolving door comment. I think a lot of this is dependent on keeping the two faces of the uniparty, distinct from one another, basically. Yeah, I suppose there's a scenario like you described that's possible, but I really don't think it's very likely that all of the right pieces are in place, and that if Donald Trump wins in November, there will never be another election again. I think it's a lot more likely that they install an autocracy by proxy, which is kind of what's already going on, just endlessly trading the mantle back and forth, but nobody really accomplishes anything. And we've reached a point where a lot of people are satisfied with that. They don't expect their politicians to accomplish anything. They just accept at face value the idea that, our Congress and our Senate have been in gridlock for 85 years or something, so nobody actually gets anything done. The best we can possibly hope for is for somebody to not come and make everything worse. And to the people who say that Trump came and made pretty much everything worse, I'd say I largely agree. The long-term consequences of his decisions were very bad. Joe Biden represented a slight course correction, but, slight isn't enough. I mean, we need to turn the car around and step on the gas pedal.
Yeah, great call, Triple G. Really appreciate it. Have an awesome weekend. Thank you for checking in. I love when people call. It's it really means something to me. It means a lot. So thank you, Triple G. I hope we'll get some other callers. And yeah, I wonder why it didn't ring. He called before. I think some of my calls, it's weird. Like some numbers work and some don't. Or maybe I just had it too low because I just hit that ringer and I did hear it. I know everyone loves when I talk about the tech stuff. Anyway, Triple G, great call. Thank you so much. Really, really appreciate it. So that helps me out too. Gets me through some of the topics that we were going to hit. I want to briefly touch, because it's a free-for-all, it's a recap, it's a weekly recap. I talked about the implications of the debate with Catholic Jack on Wednesday, and we both agreed. I don't think really it didn't take a genius. Even I could see that Harris performed better, in terms of her appearance. She looked better. She came across as more presidential. I love her. I certainly thought she showed a certain level of churlishness when she was smirking at various points. But nevertheless, she held her cool. Trump did not. She was a better debater that night. And she didn't tell as many whoppers, and they weren't as clearly BS the way Trump was. Look at the latest polling. This vindicates that view. Now, it doesn't prove it, but you've got two more polls. I talked about the post poll yesterday, I believe, that showed, it would have been yesterday, that showed Harris up by 3. The post saying, oh, no, it doesn't mean anything. She was up by 4 after the Democratic National Convention. But now, that's such a dumb argument, because that was her apogee at that point, was right after the DNC. The DNC went very well for them, for the Democrats, for the establishment. It was smooth. There weren't a lot of, any dissent was largely suppressed, repressed, and there wasn't even that much to begin with, tragically. There weren't even that many people who were really making known their objections to the Democratic Party pro-genocide policies. So she's basically back to where she was at her height, if not above it. You see these two recent polls, both released today, the Morning Consult poll and the Reuters Ipsos, both were conducted completely after the debate. So, 2 polls. Now, this isn't right. I mean, I'll wait for the New York Times poll, wait for even better polls. These aren't the best polls. The New York Times would be the gold standard at this point, but also perhaps Washington Post apparently does a very reliable poll. I just base this on what 538 has said in terms of reliability. So, she's winning. And Trump says he's not going to do another debate now. And he says, oh, they were unfair to me, the moderators, blah, blah, blah. Well, I mean, it's just, of course, a load of crap. I think Trump, I don't know if he's probably, if I were advising Trump, I would want to know whether I don't know. I would have to determine from talking to him if he really could change his debate style. If he could really be more controlled in his answers, if he could stick to talking points, if he could not go off on digressions and tangents, if he could do that, if I felt confident that he could look the moderator and Harris in the eye and the American people in the eye and answer questions directly, persuasively, I would say do another debate. Because I think on a lot of issues, he has the, he's got more people who agree with him. I think there are ways he could frame the immigration debate to his benefit. Now, this is not an endorsement of Trump at all. I don't endorse Trump. I don't endorse Harris. I dislike them both. I wouldn't vote for either one. I think both of them have terrible policies. But what I have read is that on some of the issues, he really could make some hay. Immigration being one of them. He threw that away, kicked that into the curb with the ridiculous stuff about eating pets. He could definitely do well with Ukraine. I think he actually came across better on Ukraine during the debate, but he didn't handle it as well as he could have. So if I felt as a debate handler, as an advisor, that Trump could be more controlled, could exercise real self-control, I'd say, yeah, do another debate, because you could really put to, you could really put a stake in all the talk now, which is that you're a wild card, you're out of control, which he is, right? I mean, that's who he is. But if you can't, and it doesn't look like you can, yeah, don't debate her, because you can get your message out in other ways, and people won't see a flailing, red-faced, beefy, older guy who can't control himself against a poised, younger, more attractive leader. Because she looks more like a leader than he does. She exudes a certain level of professionalism that he does not. And if he can't get himself under control, that will be the same exact impression the American voters will get. So, no, he should not debate with her unless, he can change his actions. And I would note again what I said before, but I'll underscore it. What a mistake his team made having that debate with Biden in the first place. I mean, that gave the ammo necessary to the party elites to replace Biden, because he wasn't going to go gently into that good night under any circumstances, and he wouldn't have gone if he didn't have, if Nancy Pelosi and Obama weren't able to say, you're a flop. That debate was a nightmare. Look at the results. So, Trump loses, and I think he will lose. He'll have no one to blame but his own stupid, pig-headed, narcissistic self. My advice: you got to vote for. I mean, you can't vote for either party. They're both awful. I love what Triple G called it, the uniparty. I'm going to try to remember that. I always say the duopoly. I like uniparty better because it's pretty much just one party. And so you understand that. Look at what AOC, once the hope, and my hope, right? I mean, I got her totally wrong. Jimmy got it wrong. Jimmy Dore he had her on his show when she was running in 2018. By the way, that was the year she took the seat from Joe Crowley, who was like a fourth, I guess, the third, fourth most powerful guy in Democratic leadership. I think it was fourth because it was Nancy Pelosi, Steny Hoyer, Clyburn, and then Crowley, I believe. Maybe Clyburn wasn't. Maybe Clyburn was 4 and Crowley Clyburn ascended when Crowley was voted out. I'm not sure, but either way, it was 2018 when AOC took Crowley's seat. And I was really excited about AOC. I thought, wow, she's going to make a difference. This is exciting. Wow, boy, was I wrong. So here's Dr. Stein responding yesterday to this absurd post by AOC. Nobody needs talking points to know Jill Stein hasn't won so much as a bingo game in the last decade. And if you actually give a damn about people, you organize, build power and infrastructure. Okay, so you, AOC, take your own damn advice and help Dr. Stein build power, organize, build infrastructure, work with the Green Party, develop it. Help her do that. You've got an awful lot of influence. You've got a big platform. You've got a lot of subscribers. People tune into what you have to say. You could do this. You could help. You could be part of the solution instead of tearing down the one hope that we could have for a better future. And instead, what do? You give your full-throated, full-blooded support to somebody who's unwaveringly on the side of genocidal Israel. You platform Zionists to try to humanize them to your followers, but you get nowhere when you try to get them to acknowledge the essential humanity of the people that Israel's eradicating. You're phony. You're a fraud, AOC. You attacked Dr. Stein by attributing to her the exact failures that you've had. A complete inability to build any kind of a movement. A complete failure to move the Democratic Party to the left. No progressive legislation passed. No bipartisan unity for pro-people legislation. And those who say, oh, that could never happen. No, it can happen. Bernie worked with the Republican from Utah, Mike Lee, to get us to stop supporting Saudi Arabia's genocidal actions against Yemen. But AOC never works with the right. And there were opportunities. She could have reached out to MTG, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and others to try to stop funding the Ukrainian endless proxy war against Russia. But she didn't do that. How dare she? How dare she criticize Dr. Stein? How wrong of her. All right, I want to get to comments. So a lot of social, because the free-for-all is really for you. And so I was so excited, so great to hear from Triple G, and an excellent call. And wow, he's voting for Stein too. I like that a lot. So here are some comments from social media. If you're not going to call in, then I can certainly I can center you through comments on social media. Some I might agree with, others I may not. Some I may think make some good points, others I may disagree with. So here is from a frequent commenter, but I don't out people, right? If they don't call in, they don't identify themselves. I don't. So I just put the blue square there. So this is responding to my conversation with Jack on Wednesday about tariffs and why I think, Trump is right on tariffs. Tariffs are a good call. Or did I talk about that yesterday? Maybe I talked about that yesterday. It was yesterday. So if tariffs are set too high, this is from the commentator, they may allow non-tariffed competitors to raise their prices. And then there's more. Although increased prices may slightly reduce potential sales for the remaining sellers, if tariffs have eliminated most competition, the remaining sellers will likely more than compensate for lost profit on quantity with increased profit per item. All right, so that is correct. That is accurate. And I would go beyond it. Even tariffs will always result to a degree in higher prices. And non-tariff competitors are the domestic, right? If you have tariffs, tariffs can be can be used in various ways. You could apply tariffs only to one country's manufactured goods that are important to this country. So you could say we're just going to impose tariffs on goods from China. You could say we're going to impose tariffs on every imported good. You could say we're going to only impose tariffs on goods from countries where the labor is paid below this rate. I mean, there's all different ways. Obviously, we're going to only impose tariffs on industries where we're losing share, we're losing market share in this country, right? So there's a million different ways you can use those tariffs. And I'm not an expert in all of those. Obviously, that's not my bailiwick. I'm just a generalist. I just talk about the big stuff, not the bigger picture, not in detail. But what the tariff does is it gives breathing space to domestic makers, to domestic manufacturers. For the computer assembly business up until around 2000 was mostly in this country. Computers, if you bought an IBM computer, you bought a Mac, you bought a Compaq, they were pretty much all assembled in the United States up until around 2000. 2000, the Clintons, the Democrats promoted and passed most favored nation status for China, and they made that permanent. And that began what we already had witnessed with NAFTA, a great movement of manufacturing and assembly overseas, because the tariffs were basically eliminated, or limitations. There were other ways to restrict trade from overseas, including limits. You only take in this many goods from this country. Once, though, China, with well over 1 billion people, close to 2 billion, well over 1 billion workers, became a source for imported goods that could be sold without, a significant tariff at the port of entry. Manufacturers said, why would we ever build in the United States, where we have to deal with pesky unions often, not always, but often. We have to deal with a pretty high minimum wage, certainly relative to overseas. We have to deal with these environmental laws. We'll just go over to China. We can pay workers $1 an hour less at that point. It's gone up since then a little bit. We'll go to Haiti. We'll manufacture wherever the hell we can, and we'll just cut out those greedy, demanding American workers who want a decent quality of life. And we can undercut every domestic manufacturer because our costs will be so much lower that we can sell at a price that if they tried to sell at, they'd lose money. They'd go out of business. So yes, if you put tariffs on items, the prices that you impose those tariffs on will go up, and their competitors' prices may go up as well. That's the price we pay to have decent paid workers, to have working class that can survive, that isn't dependent on, SNAP assistance, that doesn't need $25,000 subsidy to buy a home. So tariffs will, anytime you raise the price of anything, some people are going to lose out a little bit. That's just the way it is. But the benefits are tremendous, including, beyond everything else, beyond stimulating American domestic manufacturing, it's a revenue to the government. So we can reduce taxes to the degree that we take in money from tariffs. And I would make one more point, because the way you can keep prices from rising too much, and I say it in this, is with robust competition among domestic manufacturers. So couple the tariffs with aggressive antitrust action among domestic makers. And by the way, the tariffs can't just be for a year or two. This has to be a permanent process. If you lift them after a certain period of time, as soon as that, first of all, if you lift them over after a certain period of time, manufacturers may say, well, it's not worth it to relocate in the United States if after 10 years we're going to be able to, sell in China again without having to pay those tariffs. So what we'll do is we'll stay here. Maybe we'll even have to price at zero profits or even take a loss. But in the end, we know we'll make it all back up as soon as the tariff regimen is lifted. So there has to be an understanding among corporate multinationals that there are always going to be tariffs if they try to sell in the U.S. market goods that are made with cheap labor. But the other solution, and it needs to happen at the same time, is that you force domestic manufacturers. Apple says, okay, well, we're going to start making our iMacs in Dubuque, right? Because every computer that's made in China, we have to pay $1,000 just to bring it into the country. And because of that extra $1,000 payment, we can sell our computers more cheaply, even if we pay workers $25 an hour in Dubuque. Now, we should also have guaranteed health care and all that, but that's a different issue by the government. So Apple brings its computer business into the United States, but it has it's an oligopoly. There's not a lot of competition. So their prices will still be too high. So yeah, break them up. Force them to have different different companies that compete against each other. Break up their software and their hardware business. Right? I mean, there's no reason you can't have the Mac software be available to be put in computers assembled by other manufacturers. And Mac might say, well, we make super efficient computers because the software is tweaked to work perfectly with our hardware. And my response is, that's fine. Go ahead, tweak it, make it work perfectly with your hardware. That's fine. But you can't keep other assemblies. You can't keep IBM, or you can't keep Lenovo, or whatever. You can't keep Dell from putting your operating system in their computers if they want to do that. That would be my answer. And at the same time, Apple manufacturing doesn't have to use the Mac OS. It can use Windows or Linux or whatever the hell it wants. So I think that would be a big big help for the American consumer. Also from, well, and I always say I won't, let's see if I can get this up for you. Another comment. This goes to the public housing issue when I was saying that Harris's $25,000 subsidy, which I think isn't a bad idea. I'm not totally against it. It's insufficient. It's grossly, woefully insufficient. So the comment is, who says we can't have both public housing and programs to assist first-time homeowners? These would be two separate initiatives. And I agree with this. Not everyone can, and I highlighted it because I totally agree with this. Not everyone can, wants to, or should manage responsibilities of home ownership, which can at times present financial challenges. 100%. Yes, we do need government-provided housing. And that's what I said, so public housing. And it shouldn't be confined. Conversely, the working class shouldn't be confined to public housing simply because, yeah, well, I agree. But if we had more of a middle-class economy, an economy that worked for poor, struggling, and working people and the middle class, and didn't work so well for the billionaire class, didn't enable them to become billionaires, then you would have more housing that's provided by the private suppliers, by home builders. You'd have more homes built for poor, struggling, working people because they would have more money. They would be financially, a more desirable market to be targeted. And if you took away the billions and billions and billions that the tiny number of people at the top have accrued, they would become less desirable. There'd be less profits from building some, obscene mansion on top of some mountain in LA. You wouldn't be able to sell that for $50 or $100 million because people wouldn't have that much money. So yes, you reduce wealth and income disparities, you make sure everyone has enough and no one has too much, and you provide government housing. We agree. I think those are all outstanding comments. I mean, that's the solution. But yes, there should be public housing. And the issue of home ownership providing financial challenges is a really good one. That's why I don't think the $25,000 subsidy is a bad idea. But we also need to recognize that it could lead to people who may not be in a position to own that house, to be able to make the payments. It could ultimately lead to more problems for them. So that's just something to recognize. But of course, if you have a backstop, if you have public housing, if housing is viewed as a human right, then, okay, I made a mistake. I bought a house I couldn't afford. Sucks. But, I'm out of it now, and I have a place for my family that's safe, secure. Not quite what I wanted. It's not my own house, but it's good enough. It's enough. So then there's a dig at me, following up on the comment about the home ownership and the public housing, which do both. Yes, and $25,000 subsidy for first-time buyers. And by the way, $25,000 subsidy for first-time buyers and a public housing initiative. But then there's a dig at me. I understand that Harris is appealing to voters who aspire to join the ranks of middle-class homeowners. I assume this means you won't vote for her because she is not promising everything to everyone, starting with camping on the streets of San Francisco, appealing to the homeless and tents. Okay. And I'll get to the final word there. I've been incredibly clear why I'm not voting for Kamala Harris. I don't know how I could be clearer. There's no ambiguity. The reason I'm not voting for her is because she is a full-throated supporter of the Israeli genocide of the Palestinian people. Because she has never once called it out. She has never once proposed any alternative to unwavering, in her words, support of Israel. So that's the first reason. That is reason one. That is enough. If everything else were if everything else were different, but she still was clear that she's not going to put any pressure on Israel to stop killing innocent Gazans in very, very, very high numbers. The worst the UN chief has ever seen, the worst he has ever witnessed, I wouldn't vote for her. So that's the reason. It's not anything else. It's not because she isn't promising everything to everyone. It's not because she isn't on the streets of San Francisco talking to homeless people, although I wish she were. That would be nice. But it's because she is a full-throated supporter of Israeli genocide. And I will not vote for a candidate who supports genocide, who backs it, who provides the weaponry for it. So that's the reason. But if you want me to go beyond that, there are other reasons too. So it's yes, and it's that, but it's also that her policies are bad across the board. It's not that she has some good policies and would make things better on balance. It's that, like Joe Biden, like Barack Obama to a greater extent, like Bill Clinton to a greater extent, she'll make things worse. Her policies are bad ones. It's not like she's good but not perfect. Is that she's bad. I mean, I don't know. I've said this so many times. I don't know why people have trouble understanding this, and yet they keep mischaracterizing my position on this issue. Now, you could disagree. You can say, well, Hal, you're wrong. Harris has good policies. They're going to make the world a better place. Okay, well, we can debate that. But don't say to me, well, you don't like her because she's not good enough. No, I don't like her because I think she's bad. That's why. She supports a border wall. She supports fracking. Those are really bad things. She supports unconditionally Israel. She's worse than Trump on Russia. She said, and we just saw this, the Harris-Biden administration is going to risk war with Iran to approve UK missiles being deployed against Russia instead of promoting peace. So it's not that she's not perfect. It's not that she doesn't have a solution to the homeless crisis, although I really wish she did. I wish she would talk about that, but she doesn't. It's that she's bad. Her policies are harmful. Her policies will make things worse. That's why. It's that simple. It's nothing else. Now, it's very frustrating for me to have my position mischaracterized. What's also frustrating for me, though, and very frustrating, is when, and again, call me, by the way, 240-242-5646. Don't forget, if you haven't yet, click like, click subscribe. Would love to see you. By the way, I don't know why I seem to have so few people watching today. I've had really good results, really good programming in terms of numbers. Maybe there's something wrong with that, but many more people watching over this past week. I've been very heartened by that, by the way, so thank you. If you're a new viewer, you've kind of taken a shine to my program, or maybe you're taking a new shine to it where you used to like it, stop watching, now you like it more. All of that is great. Thank you. I really couldn't appreciate you more. Let's see if I can show you that. Yeah, so there you go. Click like, click subscribe. I just showed the subscribe bell. So it's not real hard. There's a square on the bottom right, blue and white. So I find it very frustrating when people say to me, well, you're demanding more than politicians can deliver, or you don't realize how bad the Republicans are. No, I get it. The Republicans are really bad too. That's why I don't support Trump. That's why I don't say you should vote for him. That's why I don't say you should vote for Republicans, because they're really bad too. So another thing that I find frustrating, besides when people mischaracterize my position, is when people mischaracterize the position of others who don't share their political view. So I saw this on another, and I mentioned to you, I try not to be a troll. I try not to go into other people's pages. But, some people who are political, who put a lot of political posts out there, maybe they're affiliated with the Democratic Party. Those are people that I'm like, no, I'm going to confront you because you're getting paid. You take money from Democrats. You take money from the party. You're employed by the party. You're disseminating propaganda. So on this Democratic Party apparatchiks website, and I don't know that they work for the party, but I know they have worked for Democrats and they have gotten money from Democrats before. So on this person's website was this comment, not by them, not the post, not the original post, but a comment trying to explain why everyone isn't behind Kamala, right? This is, how could people even consider voting for Trump when Kamala is so great? She's so wonderful. Why doesn't everybody vote for Trump? So this is one person's explanation, and this is something that really irritates me. White supremacy is the actual issue, and poor whites think Trump will ensure their continued privilege. All right. This ignores the fact, and I've talked about this often, if you think it's this idea that poor whites demand that they be supreme, you're missing a lot. First of all, as I understand it, poor whites in the past, until very recently, have actually supported Democrats in greater numbers than Republicans. But they haven't gotten anything out of it. Homeless numbers are higher than ever. And that includes a lot of whites. The housing crisis hit a lot of whites hard, hit a lot of blacks hard, hit a lot of whites hard. The offshoring of our jobs destroyed many white working class communities. And the Democratic Party was very much responsible for that, as was the Republican. So the idea that poor whites are voting for Trump because he's going to keep their privilege ignores the fact that Democratic policies have harmed them, A, and B, in the past they have voted for Democrats. And then there's this, I agree that definitely is a lot of it, and everyone who supports him unavoidably accepts the bigotry and hatred. Okay, we saw this earlier this year, a lot of black people actually were moving to Trump. Not a majority, not even a sizable minority, but he was getting more support from blacks and Latinos. He may still be, for all I know. You simplify to a point where you lose. Now, I believe in simplifying a lot. There's a lot to Trump's policies that are better for poor, struggling, and working people than there are to Democratic policies. I'm not saying all of them are, certainly not cutting taxes on the wealthy, on the billionaire class. That's terrible. But Trump did call for tariffs. He did impose tariffs. Those did help working class people. He did pull us out of, start the process of pulling us out of some of the Middle East wars, and he didn't get us involved in more wars. That helped working class people, including many people, working class people of color. But if you don't want to have a conversation, if you don't want to talk about policy, you just want to demonize, then you ignore all of that and just say, oh, he's a bigot. He's a hateful bigot. And, if you support him, that's who you are too. This discussion was about how wealthy voters support Trump because he's going to cut their taxes. Maybe there's some of that, I guess. I assume that's part of it, but more upper middle class and affluent voters seem to vote for Democrats. And Trump's policies weren't all cutting taxes on the rich. For example, remember he did this. He said you can't deduct your real estate taxes from your income taxes. It was the law that what you paid for real estate and your real estate tax, like I, pay for my house, I have to pay real estate taxes. And whatever I paid, I would deduct from my income. And I wouldn't have to pay, or was it from the income or from the actual taxes? I don't think it was from my tax bill, right? But it was from my income. So I would save a sizable chunk by paying relatively, paying real estate taxes. But Trump got rid of that. Or there's a limit. You can only deduct a certain amount. And that, by the way, in some states, some red states even, this was largely viewed as an attack on blue states because blue states tend to have higher real estate taxes, which is true. But Texas, for example, does have high real estate taxes. Texas is a red state. And so a significant deduction that wealthy Texans had is either gone or it's reduced. It's to 10,000. So if you're a millionaire, you live, you have a big ranch in Texas, you can only take off $10,000, whereas maybe in the past you could deduct $30,000 from your income, from your taxable income. It's a significant increase in your taxes because of policy. I don't love that policy, but I don't think it's the world's worst policy either. So it isn't just that Trump is raising taxes or is cutting taxes so people who are selfish and should know better are voting for him because they want that tax break. And as a matter of fact, for some wealthy red staters, that policy actually led to a higher tax bill. Or at least it may have offset some of the other benefits that the Trump ridiculous, absurd, ugly cuts on the billionaire class provided for the richest. But what really frustrates, I'm just making the point that to say, well, people who are rich and know how evil Trump is are just voting for him because he cut their taxes. That's simplifying. That's simplifying to the point where it's not true. But this post that really grated me even more was this argument that poor whites are privileged and they're trying to maintain their privilege. And I responded, that because this is a guy, this is a Facebook page which is largely used to promote the Democratic Party agenda. It's not a place where people post cat videos. This is somebody who is a political actor and uses their Facebook page to promote a political agenda. And therefore, I'm going to comment. And I responded, poor whites aren't privileged. They are poor. They are barely surviving. That is not privileged. Privilege is having something that you didn't earn and don't deserve. And I gave some examples. This is really, really important. When you accuse, because it's an accusation, people of having a certain kind of privilege, it does all sorts of things. It puts them on the defensive. It can make them feel guilty. But one thing it isn't going to do is make them want to work with you. And it's also going to make them say to themselves, wait, if you're going to call me privileged, what are you trying to take away from me? What do you say I have that I shouldn't have? Because privilege means having something you shouldn't have, that you don't deserve. That is the definition of privilege. I looked this up. So this is from Collins Dictionary. You can even see, there it is, privilege, right? Right in the top the box there. See if I can get this better, get the whole thing. So a privilege is a special right or advantage that only one person or group has. It's something you shouldn't have. You're super rich. You have all sorts of privileges that you shouldn't have, right? I don't think people should have 3 houses. I don't think you should inherit a Maserati, what have you. Nobody should have those things. Those are special privileges. Maybe you could make an argument, well, if you worked really, really hard and you earned it and you're an entertainer, sure. Maybe you have the wealth and you can purchase those, some items of luxury items. And I'm not saying we should eliminate all luxury items, but just because you were born to the manor and you can live that much better than everybody else, no, I think that's a privilege that should be taken away from people by very high taxes, high inheritance taxes, high income taxes. What does that homeless white person, what does that poor white person who's barely able to stay in their home, who's looking at a medical bankruptcy, what do they have that they shouldn't have? Because that's what a privilege is, something that you shouldn't have. And I asked this to the person on Facebook. And I was pretty irritated, and I let my irritation show. But I pulled it back. I deleted it. I hope they didn't see actually what I had first posted, because it was confrontational. I don't think it was wrong, but it wasn't. Look, I'm always about, let me say it this way. I always say we've got to work together. We've got to work together. A lot of times I say that, but I don't act in a way that makes it easy to work with. That's something I have to change. That's something I have to modify. So I pulled back the nasty post or comment, and I changed it. I tried to make it from my own perspective, my feelings. I have a negative visceral reaction to the term white privilege, especially when applied to poor people, because I believe the term deliberately mischaracterizes victims. You're a homeless person. You're a poor person. You don't know where your next meal is going to come from. You have to make a decision between paying the rent, paying for medication. You're a victim. You're not privileged. You're a victim. And if you're called privileged, you're being mischaracterized. And I think that's a real problem. You're saying that this person with white privilege is a beneficiary. No, they're a victim of an unjust, unfair society. And for that reason, I think a lot of people get this, right? People don't use the term very much anymore, but I still see it online. In the end, what the term, using that term does, what you're doing when you use that term is you're making it much tougher to unite poor, struggling, working, and middle-class people across race lines to demand true economic justice from both parties. Instead, you're saying, I'm in the party for black people, which is the Democratic Party. I'm in the party for white people, which is the Republican Party. You're a racist because you're in that party, not, hey, neither party is there for me. Neither party is fighting for me. Both parties, the uniparty, is on the side of the billionaire class. That's the message we should be promoting, not, oh, you're white, so even though you're really poor, you live in a crappy house, your life is still better than a black person who's poor and lives in a crappy house. I mean, maybe that's true, but that doesn't make it you privileged. It just means that the African American family is even more of a victim than the white family in the same place. So I was directed to look at this article to kind of educate me. And I know I'm going on for a while, but this is an important topic. And I probably, you call in now, I'll take your call, of course, 248-242-5646. You want to disagree with me. But what I'm going to say is call in next week, too. Don't just hold your, if you don't get a chance to call me now, you're watching after the show's over, you want to take issue, you disagree, let me know next week. Or post it the Facebook group, and the link is in the show description. So I was directed to read this, White Privilege, White Poverty, Reckoning with Class and Race in America. So first of all, I look at that and I'm like, wait, are whites privileged or are they poor? Because I don't think you can be both. And I understand the argument is, oh, well, they can. So here's how the article explains this. White privilege refers to the economic, political, cultural, and psychological advantages of whiteness. So we just heard that there are poor whites, right? And it even says white poverty. So for them, there's no economic benefit, right? There's no economic advantage if you're a poor white. You're poor. So I don't see there's an advantage. How can there be an advantage? And if you say, well, you could be poor, but black poor is worse than white poor, is white homeless better than black homeless? Is sleeping on a grate in New York City less awful if you're white? No, it's awful either way. It sucks either way. So we can see that for at least some white people, there's no economic advantages. And then, political, oh, well, people will listen to you more. No, they don't listen to homeless people. They turn up their noses at homeless people. They look down on homeless people. To the extent that you might get listened to because you're homeless, or because the extent that someone might listen to you if you're a white poor person, that's not a privilege. Everyone should be listened to. Everyone's plight should be addressed by government. Everyone should have enough, and no one should have too much. But many, many people don't have enough. They're not advantaged in this society. They're victims. Right, so the psychological, right, that's much harder to measure, much, much harder. But in the same article that talks about the psychological advantages of whiteness, there's an acknowledgement. I mean, I read this and I said, wait a second. If white people have a psychological advantage, then shouldn't they be more healthy, right? Mentally, right? I mean, you'd be more healthy. If you have a psychological advantage, I would think you would be less likely to commit suicide. You would be less depressed. But according to this article, white people are less healthy than Asian Americans and recent Latinx immigrants or Latino immigrants. I don't think they like the term Latinx. And also have mental health worse than. So there's no psychological advantage. If white people have worse mental health than African Americans, they have no psychological advantages. By the way, this totally surprised me. I didn't think this was the case. I would have thought that white people were mentally, had fewer instances of depression and psychoses, because poverty is a huge, depressant. It makes people miserable. And black people are poorer than white people on average. There are more poor black people, there are more impoverished black people proportionally than white. So I would have assumed that mental health of black people is worse. According to this, that's not the case. So where's the psychological advantage? There's no psychological advantage. But again, I grant there are more privileged white people than there are privileged black people in our society, many more. And there are more victims in our society who are black than who are white. And it is harder to be black than it is to be white. But the answer isn't to say the white person is privileged. The answer is to say, okay, we need to do more to make sure everyone has enough. Nobody's underprivileged. Nobody's disadvantaged by virtue of their race. That's the solution. And I saw this from the BBC, just to finish this off. By the way, I'm sorry I don't have a video. Jill Stein. I should have had one for you. Got into some of these other topics. But this is, I just wanted to show this because the BBC gives what I believe to be a clearer definition, one that you can kind of at least I could wrap my arms around a little bit as to what is white privilege or what isn't white privilege. And this is in England, UK, obviously it's different society, things are different there. But so this professor in the UK, in England, that is Birmingham City, well, it's part of the UK, Birmingham City University, who is, and the Black Studies Association there, says, for me, white privilege is the benefits that you get from being white. If you are an ethnic minority, there are certain advantages that you have, he said. And then he gives two. He gives an advantage of a disadvantage, or an example of a disadvantage, and an example of the advantage. Privilege. So if you're from an ethnic minority, you're more likely to be unemployed. I'm sure that's true. I know in our country, African American unemployment, black unemployment is always higher than white. Although Trump makes the point, and I believe he's correct, under his administration, the African American employment rate was the highest it's ever been. So if you're black and you vote for him, are you racist because there were more jobs for you? Maybe better jobs? I don't think so. But if the argument is whites are privileged because they're more likely to be employed, I call BS on that. That doesn't make you privileged. To have a job isn't privileged. Everyone should have a job. Everyone should have an opportunity to have a job. If you don't have a job, you're a victim. If you can't get a job, that pays. Now you might have, right? I mean, sometimes people don't work that hard. Hello? Anybody looking? Some people aren't going to necessarily, burn the midnight oil for their employer. But I think it's a hallmark of a civilized society where people have work. There's jobs, availability in the and the work is relatively interesting, and there's room for growth in the job and promotion and the like. But so many jobs, we don't have that. For whites or blacks, don't have those opportunities. Being employed isn't privileged. Getting a job because your father was president of the company. Getting a job because your mom was a U.S. senator. That's a privilege. Then he goes on to say, the other example of white privilege is not having to deal with racism. And I'm sure you know where I'm going to go with this. That's not a privilege. No one should have to deal with racism. No one should have to be perceived as, less deserving, less intelligent, whatever, because of their race, the color of their skin. That's not a privilege not to have to deal with racism. It means you're not a victim, an unfair, unjust victim in an unjust society of that particular pathology. Words matter. The term white privilege is counterproductive. It makes us harder. The term white privilege is counterproductive. It makes us harder. It makes it harder to build a movement that demands true justice, true equity, a guarantee for all that you will have enough and that nobody gets to have too much. All right, that's going to do it for me. Have a great weekend. Thank you for being a listener, a viewer, commentator. Appreciate the call, Triple G. I will be back. We should have a Monday with Arlen. Monday.